Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
I know we got connected maybe a couple months ago. I feel it went by really fast. We got
Yeah.
connected and we had a conversation, and I remember how exciting it was for me to talk to you because you're so excited about the very important topic that I feel is always on the front line of the world of work today, which is talent acquisition, recruitment, and just company growth, and with all the ups and downs with generations and new talent coming into many companies, a lot of talent leaving many companies. I feel like you're probably one of the best people to talk to because you have loads of experience in talent acquisition. So give my audience a little bit of background, a snapshot of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And thank you so much for having me. I enjoy podcasts. I think they're a great way to get ideas and just knowledge out there. So I'm always excited to come on and share. So yes, talent acquisition is my passion. It's not just my field and my job, right? I have been doing talent acquisition now for probably about 10 years. It depends on if you take my military time into account. So I'll start there. Started my professional career in the military. I was in the Army. I was in the Army for a total of about 15 years. In 2014, I was transitioned out. I went to the Middle East one too many times and got injured. And like many veterans, I was facing a pretty scary time. And that, most of us who are in the military for that long, at the 14, 15-year mark, we're going to stay for 20 or maybe longer. We've made a conscious decision that the military is our career and what we want to do. So here I am with a family and, having to make this transition from being a soldier into whatever it is I wanted to kind of be when I grew up from being a soldier. But that being said, I found through a virtual career fair, actually, I know those are real popular right now. Have been for a while, but I found an opportunity to be a military veteran recruiter. And I was like, well, I've done recruiting in the military. I've done, retention and reenlistment. This might be something that I could do. And they felt the same way. So my first role was with a large healthcare insurer. And I did. I went right into transactional full cycle recruiting. I think it was around operations, IT, and finance roles we were looking to bring military veterans in. But while I was doing that, I noticed that not only military veterans struggled in finding jobs and just kind of promotion and advancement in corporate America, but there were other segments of diversity that faced some challenges as well. So I kind of made a pivot, still wanting to stay into recruiting because I felt really highly it was the gateway to building a workforce and a culture and a climate. But I went into the diversity and inclusion talent acquisition, if you will, or recruiting. I did that for a few roles in a couple companies. Legis Global Solutions was one of the first RPOs I worked with. Left there, went to ADP, did some of the same things, building diversity recruiting programs. And then now I have come back out of diversity and now I am leading talent acquisition, the function for SENTA. And SENTA is a management service organization specifically within the allergy and ENT healthcare space. The exciting thing about SENTA is it's a young company. It was founded in 2019, and I've had the opportunity to come in and really build a talent acquisition function from the ground up, right? From the recruitment marketing aspect, the talent pipeline growth, all the way out to building out your metrics and how you're going to measure success. And the fun part was hiring a team and bringing that on, and that's what I have been doing for the past 10 months. And that's kind of where I'm at now. Personally, I'm married. I have 5 kids,
Wow.
all boys. And then if most people have been to my LinkedIn profile, they know I like to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I train in that pretty often and compete. But yeah, that's me and my career in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's a very rich history of just so many diverse experiences, although within the talent acquisition space, but it's so different, you know, and I think that's phenomenal. And being a father of five, I'm sure, is its own fun experience. So I cannot imagine five boys. That's really fun.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. So you've mentioned a lot of different things, and I really want to just, based on your experience, because you've done this for quite some time, what has gotten better in talent acquisition space and what has gotten worse? Let's start with easy stuff.
Yeah. That's easy stuff and difficult. I think two things. One, obviously our technology has just, oh my gosh, it's just blown out of the water, has gotten better and improved. Our ATSs are a lot more recruiter friendly. We may not get into talking about AI now, but AI is, hopefully it's not going to put us out of jobs, but it's definitely made sourcing candidates a lot easier. Waiting to see what Chat GPT does for all of us. I know I've actually used it a couple times for job descriptions. And then the second thing I think is companies are becoming more open, and we talked a little bit about this right before we jumped on, to considering hiring for attributes versus skills, right? And taking on the knowledge that there's going to be a little bit more of a learning curve around the skill set versus, the personality characteristics they need. And what we talked about was with sales, right? And being more open to finding talent in different locations or intersecting with talent in the market in different areas. Companies are starting to use media different. Podcasting. Our company has a podcast now that we use in business development, marketing, and recruiting. So it's a field that's ever changing, but I would say those two things, the technology kind of expansion and improvement, and then companies being more open. Now, I'm not talking a lot about or kind of focusing in on the companies that are saying no more resumes, we're just going to hire you if we like you. I think there's a little more to it than that, but it is good to see.
Yeah, and to that point, I do see a lot of companies hiring for that potential, but I'm curious if part of it, I'm sure there's some companies that come from perspective of like, well, we just want to give opportunity to people who might not come from specific industries or skill set, and we just want to see potential and the attitude and that character that wants to learn. But I think a bigger part is that it's so tough to find talent. Especially in a large, and it's so competitive. So it's almost like they don't have a choice. So as much as I want to believe it's for the better aspect of it, I think it's just they don't have a choice. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a CEO of a small company just last week, and he was telling me that after he hit 50 people, like in his company, after they hit that mark of 50 employees, that's when they start to see that the culture of the company is harder to maintain, because the 50 people, you got all high performers. Everybody's kind of striving to, because it's a small amount of people. And I've heard this before, over 50, that's when things become challenging for most companies. And that's when you start to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to have a bunch of high performers. I'm going to need to also bring on some other people that might need a lot of my time and development. And so I think that's what's happening more than like, oh, we're just going to give everybody jobs.
Yeah, I would agree. And what was it? Maybe 6 months ago, it was, we were begging for people to come to work. And for whatever reason, they weren't. Now I think we're starting to see a little bit of that balancing out. But, to your point of, I don't think companies would want a company of, all high performers. And, I think that in the long run could, maybe that's not the phrase I want to use. Yes, we want high performers and performers that can do their task that we hired them to do. But if everybody's a builder, would you get really anything done? Because there would be very little standardization, very little automation, optimization, whatever, right? Every process would look different according to that specific, maybe executive leader's thoughts on it. So I think that's something to pay attention to for companies to pay attention to. I think the hard thing is because we hire still on the mindset of, hey, we have to, as recruiters, be mindful of our time to fill. we don't get to keep a read on, hey, the characteristics of the last 4 people I hired in IT are what? How are the last 6 people I hired in finance, and are out of those 6, how many are still with us? How many are having challenges? Like, we don't have the bandwidth to do that, and leaders aren't doing that as a whole, just because of the fast pace of the business. And I think that's the only way you'd really keep a check on your culture. I think companies that have people and culture officers at the executive level and maybe build out a small team on that probably do well, or probably do better than others. But I think that's probably the only way to really stay on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, that involvement from the leadership is definitely needed across board. And it's in a corporate brand, like you mentioned before, the online presence, the social media presence of a company, like podcasting even, and having that presence out there for at least your generations coming up is something so important. And part of it is like you kind of get to know the culture as well through that, but then to maintain that is something that needs to come from the leadership. So to that point, I'm also curious, recently I was reading some statistics, and they're saying that last year, about 45% of recruiters that were interviewed, so they surveyed a group of recruiters from different industries, different companies, about kind of the challenges they experienced in the recruitment space. And about 45% of respondents stated that hiring managers continuously give unrealistic job descriptions and expectations for what they like, unicorn roles. Yeah. And so I'm curious to hear about, because I recruit for unicorns as well. Yeah. So like, it's a unicorn maker, one of my recruiters jokes that we're unicorn makers, but I'm curious to what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I'm actually glad you brought this up, and you're absolutely right. A hiring manager, whether they're replacing someone or they're creating a new position in their organization or their team, it's 100% unrealistic job description at first pass. It is. I think the most successful recruiters are the ones that work very heavily in building the job descriptions within their organizations and in their ATS. It comes kind of from a recruiter's perspective, obviously doing it in partnership with the hiring managers. It's obviously not a process we can own fully in talent acquisition. But several years ago, I wrote an article on LinkedIn. I don't even think it's on my profile anymore. But I called it the 60% rule, right? And this is something I still follow today, and something that I teach my team on. And what you're looking for is, you're not looking for someone who meets 90% or 100% of your job. You're looking for somebody who meets about 60%. Okay. One thing before I go into that is there was this statistic that I saw when I was doing diversity work. It just blew my mind. And you may be aware of this, is that guys or males, will usually apply. Sometimes if they meet 40% or 50%, like half of the job description, right? But when it comes to women, if they don't feel like they meet, 100% of that job description, they won't apply. Okay. And I think that's obviously a case by case basis. But that was a statistic that I saw continuously out there in the E&I world. But going back to the 60% rule, what you're really looking for is 3 categories that kind of total 60% in your mind or in the conversation. You're looking for 20%. Do they have the skills needed for this job? If it's for a computer programmer, they need to know how to code, right? If it's for an accounting associate, they need to know GAAP. They need to have an accounting degree. And then the other 20% is you're looking for, is this person from personality characteristic going to be both a team fit and a company fit? Knowing what we know, because as recruiters and gatekeepers, we're the subject matter expert of our companies. And if you're not, you should be. You better deep dive into your company. You are the front door salesman for your company. Are they a fit for your company and your values? Have they displayed anything in your initial conversation or something that may have put up a red flag? If not, you're going to tick off that kind of 20% in your mind. And then that last 20% that you're looking for is, and again, we talked about this before we jumped on, is how much of a learning curve is this person going to have for what they don't know, either from a skill set wise, not necessarily from a fit wise, because if you don't perceive they're a team fit or a company fit, you do not need to bother with the candidate, regardless of their skill set. You're going to be replacing that candidate within 60 days. But how much time are you going to have to invest to get this person to where you need to be? Kind of a roll into a function that comes to mind is payroll. If you have to replace your payroll director or your payroll analyst, and you've checked off those first 20%, what's left? Because you don't have a lot of time in payroll, right? Payroll keeps going. Joe wants to get paid. Regardless of who's sitting in the seat. Our doctors want to get paid. So that's what I would kind of say to, kind of to that area is if you don't work and consult with your hiring managers and your leaders and really drive some attainable expectations with them, you'll never succeed. You always have frustrated hiring managers saying that, oh, it's taking too long, I'm not getting viable candidates. You'll also get hiring managers, and I know you've probably had this as well, who will say, in your intake call or your intake meeting, Joe, I'm looking for this, this, and this. And if I get this, this, and this, you're going to be, that's what you're looking for. Yes. And then they're going to just change when you submit that first slate. So you have to get some real commitments around that 60%. You have to be upfront. Hey, this job description is great, but understand the candidates that you're going to see, they're not going to meet some of this, but they still may be viable candidates. And doing that coaching up front, it's going to save you time. It's going to decrease your time to fill. And it's also going to allow you to get better quality candidates.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think that's, and the interesting part about that 6 I mentioned in the beginning is it was much lower. I forgot to mention this. It was much lower the year before. So it's like I think part of it is as the world of work is evolving, and there's just so many different skill sets that are coming out, whether it's AI or, knowing how to use ChatGPT in your work, right? Like that's a big one right now. So it's almost like we're just guessing, and I feel like there's a time where we need to rethink how we do job description in general, and to your point, like hiring for that potential.
Yes.
And almost like having a conversation, but I think, and I'm curious what you think about and maybe how you work with your team in this. So when not everybody, what I've noticed also in the world of HR and hiring, not everybody who is doing the hiring has the capability to recognize that potential or to ask the right questions that are, that are not just standard interview questions, but to dig deeper and to ask in alternative ways. So any thoughts?
Yeah. That's a great point, and something really, really, really cool to bring up. I was thinking the other day, we actually just started this project. Today's Friday, right? So Monday, where we're actually going in and revamping our job descriptions. And I think it's time as an industry and as a field, talent acquisition starts thinking heavily on how we do job descriptions. What was it? Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, there was this push when Google started writing these quirky job ads, and Facebook started doing, these fun video advertisements for their jobs. They were almost like commercials. obviously not every company can invest that kind of money into recruitment marketing. But I liked where they were kind of going with that. What I feel we need to be doing is thinking about our job description as our first selling point for our company. And we should be talking more to what we may perceive the candidate is even looking for. We know candidates leave jobs. We learned this in the Great Resignation for, more money, flex, hybrid type roles, and culture. But instead of starting your job description with location, potential salary, like who cares what the street address is? Well, maybe, but that's not selling anyone in industry. Talk about why somebody would want to come hang out with Joe for, 40 hours a week. Talk about what your company's doing. When I was with one of the RPOs, I supported a pharmaceutical client. I supported a lot of pharmaceutical clients, and I really enjoyed it because, this company was keeping people alive. You're part of that. You're hiring the scientists and the people that do that, right? So show them how this position, right early in the job description, how this position is making an impact on the overall mission of the company. And then go in and talk about some requirements and the dry, boring stuff, right? But if you don't get in that job description, at least for me, when I'm looking for a job, if you don't excite me about your company, if I don't see myself, if I can't read that job description and see a little bit of myself in it, I'm going to go to page 2, page 3, page 4 of Indeed, right? And you don't want them doing that. So I think there's a way to standardize that. I don't know what it is. Maybe I will at the end of this project, because we're doing it. And
do let us know.
Yeah. We are, I'm hoping to have that all buttoned up by the end of next month. We may have to do a follow-up show.
Yes, please.
But I think it's so important for us to start thinking, because we always say, candidate experience is important. Candidate experience is important. But as a whole, we do a really poor job of following up with their questions. If they're a non-select, getting back with them in a timely manner. Maybe it's 2 weeks later when they reach out to us and ask us. We just have to start thinking about those things.
I hope it changes, and I kind of see it changing, and I see a lot of technology coming out, with AI, where they do the questions where you actually enter in front of a camera, and it actually evaluates the tone of your voice, how well you answer the questions, your body movement. So it actually spits out a score, not just based on your answers, but based on your everything else.
Wow.
Which is controversial, because, right, like there's a lot of room for, bias, and I don't know, whatever else, like that's a big thing, right? But I think eventually we'll figure out a good way to do this. And I think it works. I think it's helpful for organizations that have like thousands of applicants per roles.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like,
volume. You have to have AI in that. You can't, or you would have to have a 200-person talent acquisition team. I think that's one reason that Amazon is successful in its recruiting efforts. It's not so much their use of technology. It's just the fact that they have these massive recruiting teams. Their military team had, I remember at one time, like 30 people on it.
Oh my gosh.
Would show up at these military recruiting events. And I was like, whoa, like, are y'all all military recruiters? Like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God. If you're a large company, we're a small company. So we're doing probably some things manually that we should automate. But when we grow a little bit more, we will. But yeah, if you're a large company, if you're recruiting, 1,200 jobs a year and above, you better have a lot of automated practices. You better be using a lot of technology, because if you're not, you're going to be losing. You're going to be losing good talent. Your metrics are going to be all over the place. You're going to have a frustrated, leadership team and hiring managers.
What do you think, from like a candidate experience, what do you think a lot of people assume, like candidates assume around talent acquisition teams? And what do you, any myths you want to bust here in terms of,
Yeah.
because candidates always like, well, they're always, it's a frustrating process for sure for everybody, all sides when it
Yeah,
comes to like finding candidates. But
I was talking to a candidate the other day that I hired. It was, I hope I don't sound like I'm bragging now, but I may have to brag just a little bit. We created a new executive role here at CENTA for our ENT operations. And of course, a lot of companies will go and use executive search firms for those type. But, again, our size, we're going to go find our own leaders. So we did. We found this candidate. And she came on, she onboarded. And then she went into my boss's office, the CHRO, and she was talking to her a little bit, and then she came out and came over to my desk area, my cube. And I wish I would have brought a picture of my cube and uploaded it. It's really cool. It's full of the office stuff and Harry Potter, which is odd. Anyway, and she had told me that her recruiting experience between me and my team and time frames and expectations and transparency was the best she had ever experienced. And we're talking about, 20 plus year vice president in operations, has worked for major companies, been headhunted, had, just years and years of experience. And that meant a lot. And I asked her specifically, what stood out about what we were doing, because something happened to her sign-on bonus. It didn't get paid because I knew there were things that didn't go as they should. They were a lot of them system related. But I asked her, and she said, it was the setting of clear expectations of the time frame around your search. It was the fact that you shared, yes, there are other candidates, and this is how you stand with them. We like this about that one. We love this one about you. We're bringing a candidate on site here. Just the transparency we kept. And then our commitments, our time commitments. If we said we were going to give you feedback by the end of day Wednesday, you got feedback by the end of day Wednesday. We held our interview team and our hiring managers to task. We didn't and we don't use the excuse of, I emailed them, I hadn't heard back. I'm at their office, knocking on the door. I'm calling their cell. I'm sending multiple emails if I know I have a deadline to get to a candidate, because in recruiting, that is our deadline, is feedback. Our deadline's feedback. And it's one of our only deadlines. It's one of our top deadlines. So we owe it, just as eagerly as we went out to find these candidates and call them, and the time emails that we sent and the mail merges and all this, the time we put in that, we have to do the same in getting feedback from our hiring managers. Again, all things that we can do as recruiters and getting that commitment up front. But you can imagine that's really hard when you're hiring executives too, because you're dealing with CEOs, COOs, their schedules, other VPs, which are their peers. So I think the biggest myth is that you would hear from candidates is, recruiters just, kind of fire and forget. In other words, they find me, they send me to the hiring manager, I get interviewed, and they're done. They're not prioritizing me anymore. And I don't think it's that. I think it's sometimes talent acquisition teams are overworked, and some of the stuff I just covered is harder to do. They don't have the bandwidth to do that. But we do care. We do understand that this is important. Some candidates may be without a job and be a couple paychecks away from homelessness. So I think that's the myth I would like to dispel, that there are recruiters out there and talent acquisition teams that prioritize your candidate experience from a place of, hey, we care. We want to be as open as we can. We don't want to waste your time. We really do want to give you a good experience. And just sometimes things are out of our control.
Many, many years ago, I forget even who said it to me or where I was working. I was like many years, I was way younger, one of my first kind of jobs. And somebody told me, I had to, when I have to deal with like a customer that, you tell them that it's a process and a process takes time.
Right. Yeah.
And it stuck with me so much. And so understanding that, I think because I was in a position where I'm like, I wanted to be helpful to this customer, but I'm like, it's just a process, I can't control it. And it really stuck with me. So every time now, like, when I deal with a difficult situation, if somebody can't answer my question, it's taking time. I'm like, I'm sure there's something I don't know about the process. I'm sure there's something, there are layers to this. And this is what I wish candidates also would kind of keep in mind, that, and ask themselves, like, it could be something else. Like it might not be the recruiter, it might not be that talent acquisition person. It's just a process. And there's,
Yes.
we're kind of like the middle person, and we're trying to, we do our best to keep everybody happy and come to the right solution. So it's tough, but yeah, it's a process and takes time.
I think too, again, in talent acquisition, I try to think about, actually, go back to my military days. There was this thing we called, focus on your 5 meter zone, right? Anything that is within your 5 meters. And the concept of this is when you were like in convoy or on a patrol, you're always looking 5 meters out, right? And if you see any threats or obstacles within that 5 meters, that's what you're focused on first. So within talent acquisition, I try to, get my teams and myself, we're going to focus on the 5 meter stuff, the stuff we can control and impact. And it goes back to understanding this hiring manager on finance. There's usually a 4 to 5 day delay on feedback. And I know this already because I've hired 4 people into his organization. So our recruiters should understand, it goes back to understanding your business, understand the personalities of the people they're hiring for, and have a gist or start to develop a sequence of what that hiring process looks like for each department. But the important part is, and this is the part we can control, is we need to communicate that clearly to that candidate in that initial phone call. If we're on that phone call and I deem, you know what, I'm probably going to move this candidate to the next round, I need to be covering, hey, I think you're great. I want to move you to the next round. Here's what it looks like. Here is a timeline you can expect. And then once I give that to them, I need to work hard on my side as a recruiter, or my recruiters need to work hard on their side to adhere to that timeline. I think, and again, I think as a whole, we do okay on that. But when there's large organizations, because I know there's going to be some listeners, who work at Amazon or Coke or some of these big companies are like, yeah, Joe, that's not going to happen. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And I get that. But figuring out a way that maybe you can, maybe you start small, start piloting some kind of thought process like that in one of your smaller businesses, and then figuring out how you can automate that again, because it goes back to our tech. There's literally a technology for everything. If you go to SourceCon, there's technology that covers everything. So you can find it to help you. But yeah, we have to start doing that. We have to, and if you do, as a talent acquisition function, I can't express to you how much of a change you'll see in your process, in your experience, and just the overall quality of your hires.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. It's just it's also like, even the candidates that don't end up getting hired, it's their own that experience. It's your corporate brand. It's your reputation in the market. So it's like it's a must. And I really do hope more recruiters really see it that way. I'm curious for yourself. You've been doing talent acquisition for many years. I know you love it, and I know you kind of want to stay with it. But what are some other things you're excited about? Maybe it is within talent acquisition space, but over the next year, what are you looking forward to the most?
Yeah. So I'm looking forward here in the current position and company and the growth and the excitement and the energy that's propelling us forward. We have some just amazing talent in our leadership ranks, and then in our practices and our physicians. So I'm looking forward in the next year of we're here at a 700 employee base. Where we're going to be at in a year? Are we going to be at 1,000? Can we get there? From from our specific recruiting function, looking at, because we follow what's called a talent acquisition maturity model, and it's several phases, and maybe we don't get into that right now. I know we do have a time, but where are we at the end of this year in that maturity model? Are we doing active recruiting, or are our pipelines being built more organically? Is our time to fill reducing, staying the same, plateauing? And oh my God, let's hope it's not rising, right? So from a professional standpoint, that's what I'm looking forward to in the year. Personal, hopefully I'll win my next BJJ competition. That would be cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot to look forward to. And yeah, things are going really well.
That's amazing. And when is your jiu-jitsu competition?
Well, if I don't get injured, it's going to be in November in Atlanta.
That's amazing.
It's so I train with Alliance Jiu-Jitsu out of Roswell, and we have a great team there. A great professor or coach. They're called professors in jiu-jitsu. And gosh, I think there's like maybe 10 of us that are going to be competing.
That's awesome.
At least right now. It's a long time from November. But yeah, it's for me, jiu-jitsu has it's really been life-changing from a personal and a professional perspective. From a personal perspective, I'll just put it out there. I'm not embarrassed. So I was a heavier fellow, and the weight loss aspect of it, the overall physical fitness that it's provided, it has just been really immeasurable. And then from a professional standpoint, because jiu-jitsu is very much about technique, but following a step-by-step technique. And it kind of helps your mind stay in that step 1, step 2, step 3 process, or that kind of project management mindset flow. Actually have people on the team interested in doing it. So it's been a good thing.
I heard a lot about jiu-jitsu in general, and my audience knows I'm a huge fan of well-being and fitness. I myself am a fitness fanatic. I do personal training, and so jiu-jitsu is one of those things that I keep hearing about that is so different from every other sport. A really good friend of mine from many years ago, we've been friends forever, Eddie Mercado, shout out to him. He is the one who always tells me, it's like, you got to go try jiu-jitsu. It's just the most amazing thing. And he's been he's been in it for like a decade plus probably.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he's been in it. And he always tells me how, and like kind of what you're describing in terms of just you're able to also disconnect. It's probably one of the few sports, because when you go running, you can still think. When you're in jiu-jitsu, you're just thinking about not to get choked out or you know what I mean, or tapped out and stuff like that. So it's like you're so focused, and I imagine it allows for such stress relief. I mean, every sport does, but I think jiu-jitsu is more of a mind work as well.
I would agree totally, and agree. I don't mind sharing this for the listeners. So I have PTSD from being in the service, and jiu-jitsu is also great therapy for that, for trauma victims. There's an amazing book, and I can't remember who it's by, but it's basically a 20 or 30 or 25 chapter book on how specifically jiu-jitsu has helped men and women navigate trauma. But I would argue that most all fitness does that, right? Before I got into jiu-jitsu, I was into powerlifting and competing there. And it does, it just like your friend said, it allows you to kind of, hey, this is my thing. And then for an hour, all of my stresses at work or stresses at home are gone. And I'm just there on the mat with, my teammates. Jiu-jitsu community is a very close-knit family. And I'm pushing myself. I'm putting myself in an uncomfortable position. There's a 225-pound muscle-bound 25-year-old on top of me, just crushing me. And then all of a sudden I'm out of it,
Yeah.
here I am, this old guy, doing these things. It's just been amazing. And I would say to anyone who is, yourself included, of course, who is interested in trying it, yeah, check it out. I don't think I've ever met anyone who did a trial class and didn't come back.
Sold. Okay,
Yeah.
but it's by the time next
Okay.
time we chat about this project you're working on and the results you're gonna get
Yes.
from it, I'm gonna try jiu-jitsu class. You got that?
All right, you're gonna be a one stripe white belt next time we talk. All right.
Yeah, if only. Let's see. So before I ask you my final question, tell my audience if somebody wants to just follow you, where do you hang out on social media?
Yeah. So LinkedIn's probably the best way. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm sure I can share the links in the podcast notes, or you can reach me at joe.motes@sentapartners.com. I'm happy to jump on the phone and talk talent acquisition, jiu-jitsu, or anything really. I'm just a conversationalist by nature. I enjoy engaging and talking to other humans, and here to support in any way I can.
And the last question I have for you is, what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Yeah. I think, I read this in your email, and I've been thinking about it all day. I think I wish people, and this again has personal implications as well as professional ones. I wish people would ask themselves, should I keep doing something because it's always been done that way, or should I find a better way of doing it and be okay with doing it a different way? I wish I would have asked myself that a lot in life. From growing up and not so stable family life, and thinking that, this is just kind of the way things are. It wasn't until later in life that I realized, you can do things totally different and get to the same goal or better. In the business and professional world, sometimes we'll stick with a process that's so inefficient just because the person before us, the person before that, it could be costing our company money, but we'll just keep doing it. We'll just keep going. And that's not synonymous to just HR or anything like that. It's across all business functions. We see it always. One of the things we talked about in my Executive MBA program was challenging the process. And it's part of my leadership model now that I use anytime I go into an organization. Check their processes. Are they working? Are they as efficient as they can be? Look at your personal life. Are you coming in from work and sitting down and having, a couple beers and watching the game because it's the way you did it last year or the year before? And you're just, this is the way I am? Or can you come home 1 day a week or 2 days a week and go walk the dog, go pitch the baseball with your kid, go for a run? I don't know. I know you said you run. I don't run anymore. My knees are crazy. But just, you don't have to keep doing things over and over and not kind of maximizing your potential. So I wish people would ask themselves that more often.
I love that. That's very powerful, and it's simple yet powerful, and then actually taking action, doing something about it is a whole other thing. But I love that. Joe, thank you so much. I very much appreciate your time. Thank you for being with us, and I look forward to having a chat again when the time is right.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to reconnecting.